Dominic Vale didn't answer to anyone, not the feds, not rival families, not even God himself. He built an empire on fear and precision, where loyalty was bought in blood and weakness was buried in silence. But when the one person who'd seen him at his worst stopped showing up for work, something shifted. Inside that broken apartment, holding a woman he'd barely noticed before, Dominic made a choice that would burn his world down. Because some debts can't be paid in money, some rescues can't be undone, and some women are worth starting a war for. If you're ready for a story where love doesn't soften the monster, it sharpens him, then stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. The penthouse was too quiet. Dominic Vale stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his downtown fortress, watching the city sprawl beneath him like a kingdom he'd conquered brick by brick, body by body. Tuesday morning, 8:47. His coffee sat cooling on the marble counter. The financial reports he should have been reviewing lay untouched on his desk. Everything was exactly as it should be, except for the silence. Maria Santos had worked for him for 11 years, 53 years old, twice widowed, with a grandson in community college and a daughter who thought she cleaned offices downtown. Maria arrived every Tuesday and Friday at 8:30 sharp, let herself in with her own key, and moved through his space like a ghost, efficient, invisible, necessary. She knew which shirts he preferred pressed a certain way, how he took his coffee when he'd been up all night, and when to leave food in the refrigerator without asking questions about the blood on his cuffs. She had never, not once, failed to show up. Dominic checked his watch again. 8:52. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to her contact, listed under cleaning service, like all the others, and called. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. Her voice, warm and slightly formal. "You've reached Maria. Please leave a message." He didn't. Instead, he called Marcus, his head of security, a man whose loyalty had been tested in fire and paid for in ways that made other men grateful they'd never had to choose. "Maria Santos," Dominic said without preamble. "Find out why she's not here." "On it." Dominic ended the call and returned to the window, but the view had lost its appeal. Something cold was settling in his chest. Not worry exactly, but the kind of instinct that had kept him alive through 2 decades of a life that should have killed him 10 times over. The instinct that said when patterns broke, blood usually followed. 20 minutes later, Marcus called back. "Boss, I sent someone to her apartment. She's not answering, but her neighbor says she heard shouting last night. Male voices. Something breaking." The cold in Dominic's chest crystallized into something sharper. "Address." Marcus hesitated. "You want me to handle it?" "Address, Marcus." "Send it to your phone, boss. If this is what I think, then you'll wait for my call." Dominic hung up, grabbed his keys, and walked out of the penthouse he'd designed to be unreachable. Within 5 minutes, he was behind the wheel of a black Audi he kept registered under a corporation that didn't exist, driving toward a part of the city he normally only visited when someone needed to disappear. The building where Maria lived was exactly what he'd expected. 6 stories of brick and broken dreams, the kind of place where people worked 3 jobs and still couldn't get ahead, where the only thing cheaper than the rent was the value placed on the lives inside. He'd grown up in a building like this. He'd learned to hurt people in buildings like this. He'd sworn he'd never go back to buildings like this. He parked illegally, walked through a front door that didn't lock, and climbed stairs that smelled like old cooking oil and older regrets. 4th floor, apartment 4C. The hallway was empty except for a kid's bicycle with 1 wheel missing. Dominic knocked. No answer. He tried the handle. Locked. He knocked again, harder. "Maria, it's Dominic Vale." Nothing. He looked left, then right. The hallway remained empty. Then he pulled out the set of tools he'd learned to use before he'd learned to read, and 30 seconds later the lock clicked open. The apartment exhaled violence. The small living room had been torn apart, couch cushions slashed, coffee table overturned, picture frames smashed on the floor. A small kitchen to the left showed signs of a struggle. Chairs knocked over, dishes shattered, blood on the linoleum, not much, but enough. Dominic's hand moved automatically to the gun at his back as he stepped inside, his movements careful, controlled. "Maria." A sound from the bedroom. Faint. Almost nothing. Dominic crossed the living room in 4 strides, pushed open the bedroom door, and stopped. She was on the floor beside the bed, curled on her side, wearing the same clothes she must have had on when they'd come for her. Her face was a mess of bruises, purple and black and swollen. Her breathing was shallow, labored. Blood had dried in her graying hair. One arm was bent at an angle that made Dominic's jaw tighten, but she was alive. He holstered his gun, crossed to her, and dropped to one knee. When he touched her shoulder gently, her eyes flickered open, barely. The recognition came slowly, like she was surfacing from deep water. "Mr. Vale?" The words came out broken, confused. "Don't talk. I'm getting you out of here." "No, you can't. They'll know." "I don't care." He slid one arm beneath her shoulders, the other under her knees, and lifted her as carefully as if she were made of glass. She gasped in pain, and something in that sound, something small and frightened and human, ignited a fury in Dominic's chest that he hadn't felt in years. The kind of fury that made men disappear. The kind of fury that started wars. Who did this? His voice was quiet, controlled, and absolutely lethal. "Please, don't." "Who? Maria?" She closed her eyes, tears leaking from the corners. "My niece, Lena, she borrowed money from bad people. They came for payment." "Where is she?" "I don't know. She ran. They said they'd find her, that this was a message." Dominic carried her toward the door, his mind already calculating, planning, executing. Whoever had done this had made a mistake. They'd touched something that belonged to him, not property exactly, but close enough. They'd crossed a line without knowing who they were crossing. "You're going to be fine," he said, and meant it as both promise and threat. Promise to her, threat to whoever had put her on that floor. He took her down the stairs, past the broken bicycle, through the lobby where a tired woman with 2 grocery bags stopped and stared but didn't ask questions. People in neighborhoods like this learned not to ask questions. He placed Maria carefully in the passenger seat of the Audi, buckled her in, and drove directly to a private clinic in a better part of town. The kind of clinic that treated gunshot wounds without calling police, that asked for cash instead of insurance cards, that understood some of their clients needed medicine and silence in equal measure. Dr. Raymond Chen met him at a side entrance, took one look at Maria, and started barking orders to his nurses. Dominic had used Chen's services before, and Chen had learned not to ask questions either. The exchange was simple. Dominic paid 3 times the going rate. Chen provided care and discretion. Everyone went home alive. "She needs x-rays, a CT scan, probably surgery on that arm," Chen said, already moving Maria toward an examination room. "I'll know more in an hour. You staying?" "Yes." Chen nodded and disappeared behind double doors. Dominic found himself in a small waiting room with outdated magazines and fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying insects. He sat in a chair that wasn't built for a man his size and pulled out his phone. Marcus answered on the first ring. "Status?" "I have Maria. She's hurt. I need you to find out everything about her family, specifically a niece named Lena. Who she is, where she lives, who she owes money to, and how much. How deep do you want me to dig?" "All the way down. And Marcus, when you find out who did this, you don't move. You don't touch them. You call me first." "Understood." Dominic ended the call and stared at the waiting room wall, seeing nothing. The fury in his chest was settling into something colder, more patient, more dangerous. Rage was useful, but control was power. He would find out who had beaten a 60-year-old woman in her own home. He would find out who this Lena was and what kind of mess she'd made. And then he would do what he'd always done when someone forgot that in this city there were rules even criminals followed. He would remind them. An hour passed, then another. Dr. Chen emerged looking tired but satisfied. Broken arm, 3 cracked ribs, severe contusions, mild concussion, no internal bleeding, no brain trauma. She's tough. I set the arm, gave her something for the pain. She's sleeping now, but she'll need to stay here at least 3 days, maybe longer. Bill me for a week, private room, best care. Already arranged. Chen paused. She kept asking for someone. Lena. kept saying she was sorry that it wasn't Lena's fault. Did she say anything else? Just that Lena was good, that she didn't deserve what was coming. Chen studied Dominic with the careful neutrality of a man who'd seen too much to judge. Whatever you're planning, make sure it's worth it. Dominic stood. It always is. He went to Maria's room, stood in the doorway watching her sleep, her face still swollen but peaceful now under the influence of whatever Chen had given her. She looked small in the hospital bed, fragile in a way that made the fury in his chest burn hotter. No one should look this breakable. No one should have to. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Found her. Sending details now. The file came through in seconds. Marcus didn't waste time. Dominic opened it, his eyes scanning the information with the practiced efficiency of a man who'd built an empire on knowing things other people wanted to hide. Lena Hart. Age, 28. Occupation, waitress, the Brass Mill, downtown. Address, 1847 Morrison Street, apartment 2B. Known associates, Maria Santos, aunt, Victor Hart, brother. Financial status, $47,000 in debt, multiple creditors. Criminal record, none. Notes, borrowed $25,000 from Kozlov Organization 6 months ago. Missed 3 payments. Interest compounding weekly. Current debt estimated at $35,000. Kozlov sent collectors twice. Subject avoided contact. Third collection attempt resulted in assault on Maria Santos when subject could not be located. Dominic's eyes stopped on one line and went back to it. Victor Hart, brother, Victor Hart. The name alone was enough to change everything. Victor Hart wasn't just another criminal, wasn't just another player in the city's underworld economy. Victor Hart ran the Southside territory with the kind of vicious efficiency that Dominic respected even as he planned around it. They'd had an understanding for 5 years. Dominic stayed north of Archer Boulevard. Victor stayed south, and the city remained relatively peaceful, profitable, predictable. And now Dominic had Victor's sister under his protection, except she didn't know she was under his protection yet. According to the file, she was still working at the Brass Mill, still serving drinks and dodging phone calls, still pretending that if she stayed invisible long enough, the problem would go away. Dominic knew better. Problems like this never went away. They just got bigger until someone made them stop. He looked at his watch. 4:30 in the afternoon. The Brass Mill would be setting up for the dinner shift. He could be there in 20 minutes. But first, he made a call. Marcus, I need a team at the Brass Mill, downtown, quiet surveillance. There's a waitress there named Lena Hart. I want to know everyone she talks to, everyone who looks at her, everyone who comes within 10 feet of her. And if anyone from the Kozlov organization shows up, you contain them, but you don't engage. Understood? What about Victor Hart? If he finds out we're watching his sister, let me worry about Victor. You just make sure she gets home safe tonight. And then I'll handle the rest. Dominic ended the call, took one last look at Maria sleeping peacefully in her hospital bed, and walked out of the clinic into the late afternoon sun. The city looked the same as it always did, traffic and noise and a million people living lives that would never touch his. But something had shifted. Some pattern had broken. And Dominic Vale, who'd built everything on control and calculation and never letting emotion compromise strategy, was about to do something monumentally stupid. He was going to save a woman he'd never met. The Brass Mill occupied the ground floor of a converted factory building in a part of downtown that was trying very hard to be trendy and only succeeding at being expensive. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, craft cocktails with names like the Industrial Revolution. The kind of place where young professionals came to feel sophisticated while drinking overpriced whiskey and pretending the neighborhood's history of violence and poverty had been replaced by artisanal cheese plates. Dominic walked in at 6:15, chose a booth in the back with clear sightlines to the bar and the entrance, and waited. She appeared 7 minutes later, pushing through the kitchen doors with a tray of drinks balanced on one hand. Lena Hart looked nothing like her brother. Where Victor was broad and brutal, all sharp edges and contained violence, Lena moved with a kind of fluid grace that seemed almost out of place in the industrial chic surroundings. Dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, features that suggested strength rather than delicacy, and eyes that tracked the room with the hypervigilance of someone who'd learned to anticipate trouble before it arrived. She wore the standard uniform, black pants, white shirt, black apron, like armor. Dominic watched her work. She was good at it, he noted. Efficient without being cold, friendly without being familiar. She smiled at the right moments, laughed at bad jokes, deflected unwanted attention with practiced ease. But there was something underneath the performance, something tight and anxious in the way her eyes kept flicking to the entrance, the way her shoulders never fully relaxed. She was waiting for something bad to happen. She was right to wait. Dominic saw them before she did. Two men, mid-30s, suits that were trying too hard, walking through the entrance like they owned the place. Kozlov's people. He recognized the type even if he didn't know their faces. Collectors. The kind of men who got paid to make problems go away, one way or another. They spotted Lena immediately and made their way to the bar, taking seats where she'd have to walk past them to get to her tables. One of them, square jaw, dead eyes, said something to his companion that made them both smile. Not a good smile. Dominic pulled out his phone, sent a quick text to Marcus. Two at the bar. Kozlov. Watch, but don't move. The response came instantly. Team in position. Say the word. Dominic pocketed his phone and watched as Lena noticed the men, watched her face go carefully blank, watched her change direction to take a longer path around the bar. Professional, smart. But not smart enough because Deadeye stood up and intercepted her near the kitchen doors. Lena Hart, we need to talk. Dominic couldn't hear the conversation from where he sat, but he could see Lena's body language, the way she shifted her weight onto her back foot, the way her hand tightened on her tray, the way she glanced toward the manager's office like she was calculating whether she could make it there before things got worse. She couldn't. Deadeye's moved closer, invading her space in a way that made his intentions clear. This wasn't a conversation. This was a threat. His companion had stood up too, flanking her, blocking her exit. Other patrons were starting to notice, starting to look uncomfortable, but no one was intervening. No one ever did. Dominic stood up. He crossed the restaurant with the kind of calm purpose that made people move out of his way without knowing why. Some instinct, some primal recognition of a predator in their midst. The two collectors didn't notice him until he was right there, positioning himself between them and Lena, with a physical presence that shifted the entire dynamic of the confrontation. Gentlemen. His voice was quiet, polite, and absolutely unyielding. You're making the lady uncomfortable. Deadeye's turned, sized Dominic up, and made the first of several mistakes he'd make that evening. This doesn't concern you. I'm making it concern me. Do you know who we work for? Anton Kozlov. East Side Territory, specialty in loan sharking and protection rackets, partial ownership of 3 strip clubs, and a pharmacy that sells Oxy to anyone with cash. His operation grosses approximately $7 million a year. He pays 15% to the Bratva for the privilege of operating, and he's currently under investigation by the FBI for money laundering. Did I miss anything? The silence that followed was the kind that makes smart people recalculate. Deadeye's wasn't smart enough. Then you know you should walk away. Dominic smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Tell Anton that Lena Hart's debt has been transferred. She's under new management now. That's not how this works. That's exactly how this works. You want to discuss the details. Have Anton call me. My people will set up a meeting. Dominic pulled out his wallet, extracted a business card that had nothing on it except a phone number, and offered it with the casual confidence of a man who'd never been refused. Go on. Take it. I'd hate for there to be any confusion about who she belongs to now. Deadeye stared at the card like it might be poisoned. His companion, who'd been silent until now, leaned in and whispered something urgent. Deadeye's expression changed, confusion to recognition to something that looked almost like fear. He took the card. Mr. Kozlov will want to speak with you about this. I'm looking forward to it. Dominic's smile widened. Now, unless you're planning to order something, I think you should leave. You're disturbing the other guests. They left, quickly. The restaurant's ambient noise slowly resumed, conversations restarting, silverware clinking, the illusion of normalcy reasserting itself. Dominic turned to face Lena for the first time. Up close, she was even more striking than he'd thought. Not beautiful in the conventional sense, but compelling in the way that suggested strength tested and survived. Her eyes were locked on his, dark and wary, and churning with questions she clearly didn't know how to ask. "Who are you?" Her voice was steady despite everything. Points for that. "Someone who just bought your debt. We should talk." I can't." She glanced around the restaurant, awareness of their audience making her careful. "I'm working." "Then finish your shift. I'll wait." Dominic gestured to his booth. "Or you can walk out that door and see how long it takes for them to come back. Your choice." It wasn't really a choice, and they both knew it. But Dominic had learned a long time ago that the illusion of choice mattered, that people needed to feel like they were making their own decisions even when the options had been narrowed down to a single path forward. Lena held his gaze for a long moment, measuring him, weighing odds, calculating risks. Then she nodded once and walked back to the bar, back to her tables, back to the performance of normalcy while her world tilted on its axis. Dominic returned to his booth and waited. She worked for another 3 hours. He ordered dinner, a burger that he barely touched, and watched her navigate a restaurant full of strangers while processing whatever was happening in her head. She was good at hiding it. He'd give her that. Only someone watching closely would notice the occasional tremor in her hands, the way she had to check her notepad twice to remember orders she would have remembered automatically before. At 9:30, the dinner rush ended. At 9:45, Lena emerged from the kitchen in jeans and a jacket, her apron folded in her bag. She walked directly to Dominic's booth and sat down across from him without being invited. "Okay," she said. "Talk. Your aunt is in the hospital." Whatever Lena had been expecting him to say, it wasn't that. The blood drained from her face so quickly Dominic thought she might pass out. "What? How? When?" "This morning. Kozlov's people came looking for you, found her instead. Broken arm, cracked ribs, severe bruising. She'll recover." "Oh, God." Lena's hands came up to cover her face, and Dominic watched her shoulders shake with the effort of keeping herself together. "This is my fault. I should never have. She told me not to borrow from them. She told me it was dangerous, but I didn't listen, and now you owe me instead of Kozlov." Dominic's voice cut through her spiral with the precision of a blade. "Which means you're going to tell me exactly what happened, how much you owe, and why you thought it was a good idea to borrow money from a man who breaks kneecaps for entertainment." Lena lowered her hands, and the look she gave him was equal parts desperation and defiance. "Who are you?" "Dominic Vale." He watched the name hit her, watched recognition bloom into something close to terror. Good. Fear meant respect, respect meant cooperation, and cooperation was what he needed if he was going to fix this mess before it got worse. "Oh, God," she said again, but differently this time. You run the North Territory. You're the most feared crime boss in the city," Dominic supplied helpfully. "Yes, and you're the sister of Victor Hart, which makes this situation significantly more complicated than a simple debt transfer. So I'm going to ask you again. What happened?" Lena took a shaky breath, visibly steadying herself. When she spoke, her voice was stronger. "I needed money, fast. My roommate got sick, needed surgery. The hospital wanted $20,000 up front, and she didn't have insurance. I couldn't just let her die. So I asked around, found someone who said they could help. I didn't know it was Kozlov until after I'd already signed the papers." "How much did you borrow?" $25,000. I thought I could pay it back. I had a plan. I was working double shifts. She stopped, closed her eyes. "But the interest was worse than they said. And then my roommate died anyway, and I couldn't keep up." Dominic processed this with the cold calculation of a man who'd seen 1,000 variations of the same story. "How much do you owe now?" $35,000, plus whatever keeps compounding every week I don't pay." "And your brother?" Lena's expression hardened. "Doesn't know. Can't know. If Victor finds out I'm in trouble, he'll kill whoever's involved, and then the entire city will go to war and more people will die. I won't be responsible for that." "Noble, stupid, but noble." Dominic leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm paying off your debt to Kozlov. In return, you're going to work for me until the debt is settled. I already have a job. Not as a waitress. I need a housekeeper. My previous one is going to be recovering for several weeks. You'll clean my apartment, manage my schedule, handle things that need handling. The work pays $1,500 a week, which means you'll have your debt cleared in just under 6 months if you don't miss any time. Lena stared at him like he'd grown a second head. You want me to be your maid? I want you to be alive and out of debt. This is how we accomplish both. Dominic pulled out another business card, this one with an actual address. You start Monday, 8:30 a.m. Don't be late. And if I say no, then you walk out that door and I wash my hands of this entire situation. Kozlov will send more people. They won't be as polite as the ones tonight. Your aunt will heal up, go home, and they'll find her again. And eventually, your brother will find out, and then we'll have the war you're so desperate to avoid. Or, he slid the card across the table. You take the job, clear the debt, and everyone lives to see next year. Your call. Lena picked up the card, turning it over in her fingers like it might reveal some hidden truth. Why are you doing this? Because Maria Santos has worked for me for 11 years, and I don't appreciate people hurting my employees. Because your brother and I have an understanding that I'd prefer to keep intact. And because, Dominic paused, choosing his next words carefully. Because I can. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was true enough. The whole truth was more complicated, involved fury and calculation, and the uncomfortable recognition that when he'd seen Lena standing in that restaurant facing down 2 men who would have hurt her without hesitation, something in his chest had tightened in a way that had nothing to do with strategy or territory or maintaining the balance of power. But he didn't say that. Some truths were better kept buried. Lena studied his face, looking for the trap, for the hidden cost, for the thing that would make this offer exactly what she feared it was. She wouldn't find it because there wasn't one, at least not yet. Dominic didn't make plays he hadn't thought through. He didn't offer protection without understanding exactly what it would cost. Okay, she said finally. I'll do it, but I have conditions. Despite himself, Dominic was impressed. I'm listening. First, my brother can't know, ever, if I even think you've told him. I have no interest in involving Victor, agreed. Second, this is just a job. I clean, I work, I pay off the debt, nothing else. Nothing else, Dominic echoed, though they both knew the words were meaningless. The moment he'd walked into this restaurant, the moment he'd stood between her and Kozlov's collectors, the moment he'd decided she was worth protecting, it had already become something else. But they could pretend otherwise for now. Pretense had its uses. Third, when the debt is paid, I'm done. I walk away, you let me go, and we never see each other again. This time, Dominic didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood up, dropped enough cash on the table to cover his untouched burger and a generous tip, and looked down at her with an expression that gave nothing away. 6 months, he said. We'll see how you feel about walking away when we get there. My driver will pick you up Monday morning, 7:30. Be ready. He left her sitting in the booth, left her holding his business card, left her with the weight of a choice that wasn't really a choice settling onto shoulders that had already carried too much. Outside, the city was alive with its usual Tuesday night energy, cars and voices, and the distant sound of sirens heading toward someone else's emergency. Dominic's phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Package delivered. Kozlov won't be a problem. Dominic pocketed his phone and walked toward where his car was parked, thinking about Maria sleeping peacefully in a hospital bed, about Lena Hart's defiant eyes and desperate bargaining, about Victor Hart and the careful balance of power that kept this city from tearing itself apart. He'd just made things significantly more complicated. But as he slid behind the wheel and pulled out into traffic, heading back toward a penthouse that would feel emptier than usual, Dominic realized he didn't care. Some complications were worth it. Some rescues couldn't be undone. And some women, like it or not, changed everything the moment they walked into your life. Even if they arrived carrying someone else's debt and their brother's war painted on their backs, especially then. The city lights blurred past his windows, and Dominic Vale, who'd built an empire on never making emotional decisions, drove home knowing he'd just made the most emotional decision of his life. And somewhere behind him, in a restaurant that was closing down for the night, Lena Hart sat alone in a booth, holding a business card that felt like a death sentence and a lifeline all at once, and wondered what the hell she'd just agreed to. The answer, though neither of them knew it yet, was everything. Monday morning arrived with rain. Lena stood at her apartment window, watching water streak down the glass while her phone buzzed with the fourth text from an unknown number. Driver downstairs. Black Mercedes. 7:30 sharp. She'd spent the weekend in a fog of anxiety and hospital visits, sitting beside Aunt Maria's bed and lying about everything. Yes, she'd found a new job. No, she couldn't explain the details yet. Yes, everything would be fine. The lies came easier than the truth would have, that she'd essentially sold herself to the most dangerous man in the city to pay off a debt that had nearly gotten the only family she had left killed. Maria had held her hand, bruised fingers trembling, and whispered, "Be careful, mija. Men who fix problems like this always want something in return." Lena had promised to be careful. Another lie. Now, staring at her reflection in the rain-streaked window, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back severely, wearing the most professional outfit she owned, Lena barely recognized herself. 28 years old, and she'd somehow become the kind of woman who climbed into strangers' cars and agreed to work for criminals. Her mother would have been horrified. Her brother would have been murderous, which was exactly why Victor could never know. She grabbed her bag, locked her apartment, and descended 3 flights of stairs that smelled like mildew and somebody's burnt breakfast. The Mercedes idled at the curb, sleek and black and completely out of place in this neighborhood. The driver, a man in his 50s with silver hair and the kind of face that had seen everything twice, stepped out and opened the rear door without a word. Lena climbed in. The interior was leather and silence. Classical music played softly through speakers she couldn't see. The driver pulled into traffic with the smooth precision of someone who'd done this 10,000 times, and Lena watched her neighborhood disappear behind tinted windows, replaced by streets that got progressively cleaner, buildings that got progressively taller, people whose problems were probably very different from hers. 20 minutes later, the Mercedes pulled up to a high-rise that stabbed into the gray morning sky like a declaration of dominance. The doorman opened her door before she could reach for the handle. "Miss Hart, Mr. Vale is expecting you. Top floor." Of course he was. Men like Dominic Vale didn't wait. They expected the world to arrive on time. The elevator was all mirrors and polished chrome, rising so smoothly she barely felt the motion until the numbers climbed past 20, past 30, past 40. The doors opened directly into a penthouse that redefined every assumption Lena had made about how criminals lived. No gold-plated anything, no ostentatious displays of wealth. Instead, the space was all clean lines and muted colors, gray and white and black, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city that looked almost beautiful from this height, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than she'd make in 5 years, art on the walls that she recognized from museum catalogs. Everything chosen with the kind of taste that suggested money was never the object, only excellence. Dominic stood at those windows, coffee in hand, wearing a charcoal suit that fit like it had been created specifically for his body. He didn't turn when she entered. "You're on time." "Good." His voice carried across the space without him raising it. Maria always said punctuality was the only virtue that mattered. "How is she?" Lena's voice sounded too loud in all this expensive quiet. "Healing. The doctors say she can go home by Friday." Now he turned, and the full force of his attention hit Lena like a physical thing. In the restaurant, she'd been too frightened to really look at him. Now, in the cold morning light, she saw him clearly. Not handsome exactly, but compelling in the way that power was always compelling. Dark hair going silver at the temples, eyes that missed nothing, a face that revealed exactly what he wanted it to reveal and nothing more. "She's been asking about you." "I visited her, both days." "I know, the nurses mentioned it." Dominic set down his coffee cup. "I also know you didn't tell her the truth about our arrangement. Because the truth would have terrified her. Or because you're ashamed of it." The words were a scalpel, cutting straight through to something Lena didn't want to examine. She lifted her chin. "I'm here, aren't I? I'm doing what you asked. If you want to psychoanalyze me, that's extra." Something that might have been amusement flickered across Dominic's face. "Fair enough. Let me show you around."
Butati.
The tour was quick and efficient. Master bedroom that she wouldn't be cleaning, Guest room, she would. Kitchen that looked like it had never been used for actual cooking. Office that was off limits unless specifically requested. Dominic moved through the space like he owned it, which he did, describing routines and expectations with the brisk precision of someone giving orders to subordinates. I'm up by 6. I work out for an hour, shower, and have coffee ready by 7:30. Breakfast I handle myself. I'm particular about it. You'll arrive at 8:30 on Tuesdays and Fridays, same as Maria. Laundry, cleaning, errands if needed. I entertain here occasionally, so you'll need to prepare the space when I give you advance notice. Questions? What happened on the days Maria didn't come, before? I managed. Dominic opened a closet that contained more cleaning supplies than Lena had seen in her entire life. I don't actually create much mess. I'm rarely here, but appearances matter and a well-maintained home is part of the appearance. So this is just theater. You're paying me to dust a place you barely live in? I'm paying you to clear a debt that would have gotten you killed. The dusting is incidental. He closed the closet. Though I do expect it to be thorough, Maria had standards. Had. She's not dead. Has, present tense. My mistake. But Dominic's expression suggested it hadn't been a mistake at all, that he'd been testing her, seeing if she'd correct him, measuring her willingness to push back. You'll find everything you need in that closet. I'll be in my office if you have questions. Otherwise, I prefer not to be disturbed. He left her standing in the pristine hallway, surrounded by wealth she couldn't comprehend and responsibilities she hadn't asked for. Lena got to work. Cleaning, she discovered, was meditative. The repetitive motions, dusting, vacuuming, polishing, required just enough attention to keep her hands busy, but left her mind free to wander. She moved through rooms that smelled like expensive cologne and loneliness, touching things that cost more than her rent, slowly building a picture of the man who lived here. He read philosophy and military history, judging by the books on his shelves. He collected watches, but only wore one, simple, mechanical, probably worth a small fortune. His closet contained 20 suits in varying shades of gray and black, 12 white shirts, no casual clothes except for workout gear. His refrigerator held sparkling water, expensive cheese, and takeout containers from restaurants she'd never be able to afford. No photos anywhere, no personal mementos, nothing that suggested he had a life outside of work and control. It was the loneliest home she'd ever been in. At noon, Dominic emerged from his office. Lunch? Lena looked up from polishing counters that were already spotless. I brought something. I'm ordering Thai. What do you want? I'm fine, really. Lena, he said her name with the patient exasperation of someone dealing with a stubborn child. I'm ordering enough food for 2 people. You can either tell me what you want, or you can watch me eat while you starve out of some misplaced sense of professional boundary. Your choice. She wanted to refuse out of principle. Instead, she said, Pad see ew, chicken, medium spice. See? That wasn't hard. He pulled out his phone, ordered efficiently, then looked at her again. How's it going? It's going fine. Everything's fine. The place it's very clean already, actually. Maria must have been here Friday. She was. But I want you to get familiar with the space, understand where things are. Next week you'll have more to do. Dominic leaned against the kitchen counter, a casual posture that somehow didn't diminish his presence. How's your roommate situation? The question surprised her. What? You said your roommate died. I assume you're covering rent alone now. Yes. I found someone new. She's fine. Why? Because people with debt problems often have housing problems. If you need help, I don't. The words came out sharper than she'd intended. I mean, thank you, but I can handle my own rent. I just need to handle this debt, and then everything goes back to normal. Normal. Dominic repeated the word like it was foreign. Is normal when you're working 60-hour weeks to barely stay afloat? When you're borrowing from loan sharks to pay for medical emergencies? When you're lying to your family about what you're doing to survive? That's not... Lena stopped, throat tight. You don't know anything about my life. I know everything about your life. I had you investigated, remember? I know you grew up in foster care after your parents died. I know you and your brother were separated when you were 12 and didn't reconnect until you were 20. I know you've worked 7 different jobs in the past 5 years, never staying anywhere long enough to build security. I know you send money to 3 different charities every month, even though you can't afford it. Should I go on? Heat flooded Lena's face, shame and anger mixing into something that tasted bitter. You had no right. I had every right. You think I let strangers into my home without knowing exactly who they are? Dominic pushed off the counter. But here's what I don't know. I don't know why someone who clearly has their brother's protection is living like she doesn't. Victor Hart runs half this city. He could set you up with a legitimate job, a safe apartment, a life where you never have to worry about money again. So why aren't you letting him? Because Victor's help came with chains. Because Victor's protection meant living under his rules, accepting his money, becoming another piece on his chessboard. Because the one time she'd accepted his help, she'd spent 3 years feeling like property instead of family. Because freedom, even desperate scrambling freedom, was better than being owned. But she didn't say any of that. Because I don't want to owe him, she said instead, the way I'm going to owe you. You already owe me. The difference is I'm telling you exactly what the terms are. No surprises, no hidden costs, 6 months of work, debt cleared, you walk away. Victor wouldn't give you terms, he'd give you obligations. The buzzer rang before Lena could respond. Food arriving, conversation interrupted. Dominic retrieved the delivery, and they ate in a silence that was somehow more comfortable than the talking had been. Lena focused on her noodles and tried not to think about the fact that she was having lunch with a crime boss in his penthouse like it was a normal Monday afternoon. Tell me about your brother, Dominic said eventually. I thought you already knew everything. I know the facts. I don't know what he's like with you. Lena set down her fork, considered lying, decided there was no point. Protective, controlling, violent when he thinks someone's threatened me. He wants me to be safe so badly that he can't see how suffocating his version of safety is. Sounds familiar. Are you saying you're like him? I'm saying protection and control often look the same from the outside. The difference is in the intent. Dominic studied her across the table. Victor wants to control you because he's afraid of losing you. I want to protect you because someone hurt Maria, and that debt needs to be paid. That's not protection. That's revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing. The honesty of it surprised her. Most men dressed up their violence in noble language, pretended their cruelty served some higher purpose. Dominic just laid it out plainly. This is what I am. This is what I do. Take it or leave it. Lena found herself almost respecting him for it. After lunch, she returned to cleaning while Dominic disappeared back into his office. Hours passed in careful quiet, punctuated only by occasional phone calls she couldn't quite hear through thick doors. At 5:30, Dominic emerged again, this time wearing a different jacket, keys in hand. I have a meeting. Lock up when you're done. The car will take you home at 6. I can take the bus. The car will take you home at 6, he repeated, as if she hadn't spoken. And Lena? This week, I need you to attend a dinner party I'm hosting Thursday night, 7 p.m. You'll help serve, manage the kitchen, make sure everything runs smoothly. I'm not a caterer. You're whatever I need you to be until the debt is cleared. That was the arrangement. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. I'll have appropriate clothing sent to your apartment. You'll be compensated for the extra time. And before you ask, no, your brother won't be there. This is business, not territory politics. He left before she could protest further, and Lena was alone again in the expensive silence. Thursday arrived too quickly. The dress that had been delivered to her apartment was simple but elegant, black, professional, fitted enough to look intentional but conservative enough to disappear into the background. Whoever had chosen it understood the assignment, looked competent, not decorative. The driver picked her up at 6:15. The city was different at this hour, caught between day and night, the last of the legitimate workers heading home while the nighttime city was just waking up. Lena watched the transition through tinted windows and wondered which world she belonged to now. The penthouse had been transformed. Soft lighting instead of the usual harsh efficiency. The dining table extended to seat 12, set with china and crystal that probably cost more than her car. Catered food arriving in warming trays, wine bottles that she didn't recognize but knew were expensive. Dominic in a black suit that made him look even more dangerous than usual, directing traffic with quiet commands that people obeyed instantly. Lena. Good. He handed her a small earpiece. Kitchen coordination. The caterers know what they're doing, but I need you managing flow, making sure food comes out when I signal, drinks stay filled, plates get cleared. Think you can handle it? I've worked restaurants for 10 years. I can handle it. Good. He paused, studying her in the dress. Something flickered in his expression. Appreciation, maybe, or calculation? You look professional. That's what you're paying for, isn't it? Professional competence? Among other things. He turned away before she could ask what other things meant. The guests arrived at 7 sharp, men in expensive suits, women in designer dresses, everyone moving with the casual confidence of people who'd never had to worry about money or consequences. Lena recognized a few faces from newspapers and society pages. A city councilman, a real estate developer, a woman who owned half the galleries downtown, the kind of people who shaped the city through decisions made over wine and small plates. And they were all here, in Dominic Vale's penthouse, pretending he was just another businessman instead of the criminal who probably had leverage on half of them. Lena worked the room like she'd been born to it, anticipating needs before they were voiced, removing empty glasses before anyone noticed, coordinating with the caterers to keep everything flowing smoothly. She was good at being invisible when she needed to be, at reading people and situations, at managing chaos disguised as elegance. But she couldn't help overhearing pieces of conversation. The rezoning proposal needs to pass, Dominic, or the entire project falls apart. Your investment in the waterfront development was appreciated, though some of my colleagues have questions. If the mayor's office asks, this was purely social, you understand. This was how power actually worked, Lena realized. Not through violence or threats, but through connections and favors, through knowing who owed what to whom, through positioning yourself as the person everyone needed but no one could afford to cross. Dominic moved through his own party like a conductor, orchestrating conversations, steering topics, making sure everyone left with exactly the impression he wanted them to have. It was terrifying and fascinating in equal measure. At 9:30, most of the guests had left. A few stragglers remained, nursing final drinks and exchanging business cards. Lena was clearing plates from the dining room when she felt someone watching her. The woman was probably 60, elegant in the way that came from decades of money and confidence. She'd been introduced as Margaret Chen, something to do with arts funding and city planning. Now she was studying Lena with the kind of sharp attention that suggested she saw more than most people. "You're new," Margaret said. Not a question. "Yes, ma'am." "Maria's been with Dominic for years. She's all right, I hope?" "She's recovering. An accident." Margaret's expression suggested she knew exactly what kind of accident. "You're doing well, natural at this. Ever think about event planning professionally?" "I'm just helping out temporarily." "Pity. You've got the instinct for it." Margaret glanced toward where Dominic stood talking to the last guests. "Be careful with him. He's not cruel, but he's absolute. Once you're in his world, it's very hard to leave." Before Lena could respond, Margaret was gone, swept into a final conversation before departing. By 10 p.m., the penthouse was empty except for Lena and Dominic. The caterers had packed up and left. The elegant dinner party had dissolved back into expensive silence. Lena worked in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher, wiping down counters, restoring order. "Leave it." She turned to find Dominic leaning against the doorframe, jacket off, tie loosened. He looked tired in a way she hadn't seen before. Not physically exhausted, but the kind of tired that came from wearing a mask for hours and finally being able to drop it. "I'm almost done." "I said leave it. Sit down." He gestured to the living room. "We need to talk." Lena's stomach dropped. Nothing good ever started with "we need to talk." But she followed him to the living room, sat on the edge of the couch while he poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter. He offered her one. She took it without arguing. "You did well tonight," Dominic said, settling into a chair across from her. "Better than I expected." "Was this a test?" "Everything's a test. The question is whether you pass." He sipped his whiskey. "You handled pressure well, read the room, anticipated needs. Those are valuable skills." "For a housekeeper?" "For anyone in my world." His eyes met hers over the rim of his glass. "I'm going to need you to do more of these. Dinners, meetings, occasions when I need someone I can trust managing details. You'll be compensated appropriately." "That's not what we agreed." "I'm expanding what we agreed to. You're still clearing the same debt on the same timeline. This is additional income. Unless you're going to tell me you don't need the money? Lena wanted to say no, wanted to maintain the boundaries they'd established, keep this arrangement simple and transactional. But the truth was she did need the money, desperately, and turning down legitimate income because of pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. Fine, she said, but I want clear parameters. When you need me, how much notice I get, what exactly I'll be doing. Fair. I'll have Marcus send you a schedule weekly. Dominic leaned back, studying her. Why do I get the feeling you're not afraid of me the way you should be? Who says I'm not afraid? Your body language, the way you argue with me. Most people in your position would be much more deferential. You want me to be afraid? I can pretend if that helps you sleep at night. I want you to be honest. Fear I can work with. Pretense just wastes everyone's time. He finished his whiskey. Tell me the truth. Why did you really borrow from Kozlov? Lena stared into her own glass, watching amber liquid catch the light. She could lie. Should lie. But Margaret Chen's words echoed in her head. Once you're in his world, it's very hard to leave. And something about the weight of them made her reckless. Because my roommate Sarah was dying, and I couldn't save her, but I couldn't not try either. Because I've spent my whole life watching people I care about suffer while I stand there useless. Because for once, I wanted to be the person who fixed things instead of the person things happened to. She looked up, met his eyes. Because I'm tired of being powerless. The silence that followed was different from before, heavier, charged with something Lena couldn't name. Dominic set down his glass carefully. Power isn't something you borrow, he said quietly. It's something you take, and the cost is always higher than you expect. Is that what you did? Took power? Every day of my life since I was 14 years old. His expression was unreadable. And I've paid for it in ways you can't imagine. Then why do it? Because the alternative is being at someone else's mercy. And I decided a long time ago I'd rather die than be helpless again. The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. Lena realized with sudden clarity that Dominic Vale wasn't just offering her a job. He was offering her something more dangerous, understanding, recognition. The acknowledgement that they were both survivors of different wars, both fighting to control lives that had tried to control them. And that recognition terrified her more than anything else he could have done. I should go, she said, standing abruptly. It's late. Dominic didn't argue, just stood, walked her to the elevator, watched her step inside. As the doors began to close, he spoke one more time. Lena, what Margaret told you earlier about it being hard to leave my world. His eyes were dark, serious. She's right. So if you want out, now's the time. After this, the debt gets more complicated. Lena's hand hovered over the button that would hold the doors open. She could walk away, could find another way to pay off Kozlov, could disappear into the city's vastness, could return to her desperate, scrambling freedom. But she thought about Aunt Maria in the hospital bed, about Victor's suffocating protection, about Sarah dying because $20,000 might as well have been $20 million, about being powerless, always powerless, while the world happened around her. See you Tuesday, she said. The elevator doors closed on Dominic's expression, something between approval and regret, warning and welcome. And as the car descended 47 floors back to street level, back to her regular life that was becoming less regular by the day, Lena pressed her forehead against cool metal and wondered what she'd actually just agreed to. The answer would come soon enough. The truth came for her on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks later. Lena had fallen into a rhythm with the work, Tuesdays and Fridays at the penthouse, occasional evening events when Dominic needed an extra pair of hands, careful maintenance of the fiction that this was just employment, nothing more complicated. She'd paid down $2,000 of her debt. Aunt Maria had returned home with strict instructions to rest and a monthly check from Dominic that she'd tried to refuse until he'd made it clear refusal wasn't an option. The city had continued its usual dance of violence and commerce, and Lena had managed to convince herself that she was navigating everything successfully. She should have known better. The penthouse was quiet when she arrived that morning, which wasn't unusual. Dominic often left early for meetings, trusting her to work without supervision. But something felt different as she stepped off the elevator. A tension in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks. She found him in the living room, standing at those floor-to-ceiling windows with his back to her. Two other men were there too. One she recognized as Marcus, Dominic's head of security, a man built like a wall and just as expressive. The other was younger, 30s maybe, with the kind of dangerous energy that suggested he enjoyed his work a little too much. "Miss Hart," Marcus's voice was professionally neutral. "Mr. Vale would like to speak with you." The formality of it set off every alarm in Lena's body. She set down her bag slowly, approached the windows with the careful steps of someone walking into a trap. Dominic turned. His expression was carved from ice. "Tell me about Victor," he said. Lena's throat went dry. "What?" "Your brother. Tell me about him. Specifically, tell me about the last time you spoke to him." "I don't... We haven't talked in weeks. I told you, I'm avoiding..." "You're lying." Dominic's voice was quiet, which made it more terrifying than if he'd shouted. "I'm going to ask you one more time, and I want the complete truth. When did you last speak to your brother, and what did you tell him about me?" The room felt like it was shrinking. Lena glanced at Marcus, at the other man whose hand rested too casually near a weapon she could now see beneath his jacket, back to Dominic's face that gave away nothing except barely controlled fury. "3 days ago," she said, the words coming out rushed. "He called me. I didn't tell him anything, I swear, He wanted to know where I was working, and I said I'd found something new, and he kept pushing, and I hung up, that's all. I didn't mention you, I didn't mention any of this." But he knew enough to start asking questions. Dominic moved closer, and Lena forced herself not to step back. "He knew enough to send people to watch you, to follow you here, to start making very specific threats about what he'll do to anyone employing his sister without his permission." The blood drained from Lena's face. No, he wouldn't. I was careful. I made sure..." "Careful?" For the first time, real anger cracked through Dominic's control. "You thought you could keep this secret from Victor Hart? From a man who has eyes on every corner of this city? From your own brother who's probably been tracking your movements since the day you reconnected?" "I didn't know." "That's the problem, Lena. You didn't know. You didn't think. You just walked into my world carrying your brother's war on your back and expected it wouldn't explode." Dominic turned to Marcus. "Show her." Marcus pulled out a phone, tapped the screen, and handed it to Lena. The video showed her apartment building, the timestamp from yesterday evening. She watched herself come home from her shift at the brass mill, watched herself climb the stairs. And then, 10 minutes after she'd gone inside, she watched two men she didn't recognize position themselves across the street, watching her windows. Victor's people. The phone showed 3 more videos. Her leaving for the penthouse this morning. Her having coffee with Aunt Maria on Sunday. Her walking through downtown on her day off. Always the same 2 men. Always watching, always reporting back. "He knows," she whispered. "He knows everything." Not everything, not yet, but he knows enough to be a problem. Dominic took the phone back. "I received a message this morning. Very polite, very professional. Victor Hart would like to meet with me to discuss a mutual concern. He didn't specify what concern, but we both know what he's talking about." "What did you say?" "I agreed to meet him, tonight, 7 p.m., neutral territory." Dominic's eyes were hard. "The question is what I'm going to tell him when he asks why I have his sister working for me." Lena's mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. "Tell him the truth. Tell him I owed money to Kozlov, and you bought the debt, and this is just business. He'll understand business." "Will he? Will he understand why I personally went to collect you from a restaurant? Why I'm housing you in my home twice a week? Why I bought your debt from Kozlov instead of letting it play out?" Dominic's voice was scalpel sharp. "Because I don't understand it myself, Lena. I've been trying to figure out for 3 weeks why I made such a catastrophically stupid decision." The words hit like a physical blow. Lena felt something crack in her chest. Not heartbreak exactly, because that would require caring about what he thought of her, but something close. The recognition that whatever she'd thought was happening between them, whatever fragile understanding they'd built, was just another illusion. "Then tell him you made a mistake," she said, lifting her chin. Tell him you're releasing me from the debt, and I'll go back to my life, and you can go back to yours. Problem solved. It's not that simple. Why not? Because Victor won't believe it. Because men like him don't accept simple explanations when complex ones involve their family. Because the moment I release you, he'll assume I used you and discarded you, and then we'll have exactly the war you were trying to avoid. Dominic moved closer, and Lena could see the calculation in his eyes, the chess game playing out. There's only one explanation that might work. One story that might satisfy him without triggering a territory war. What story? The truth. He reached out, tilted her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. That you're not just my employee, that this became personal, that I'm protecting you not because of business, but because I want to. Lena jerked back. That's not true. Isn't it? Dominic's smile was knife-edged. You think I buy every woman's debt from loan sharks? You think I personally intervene in restaurant confrontations? You think I let just anyone into my home, my space, my life? He let the questions hang. Victor will believe we're involved because it's the only explanation that makes sense of my behavior. And if he believes it, he'll have to decide whether to accept it or go to war over it. And if he chooses war, then at least we'll know where we stand. The casual way he said it, like war was just another business decision, made Lena want to scream. You can't just decide we're involved without asking me. I'm not deciding anything. I'm telling Victor what he needs to hear to keep the situation from exploding. What happens between us is separate. Nothing happens between us. This is a job, a debt. That's all. Dominic studied her for a long moment, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Keep telling yourself that. Maybe eventually it'll be true. He turned away before she could respond, already moving into planning mode. Marcus, I want full security for tonight's meeting. Neutral territory means the warehouse district, building 17. Sweep it first, check for weapons. Make sure Victor's people don't outnumber ours. What about Miss Hart? Marcus asked. She stays here. If this goes wrong, I want her somewhere Victor can't immediately access. No. Lena found her voice. If you're meeting my brother to discuss me, I'm going to be there. Absolutely not. He's my brother Dominic. I have a right. You have exactly 0 rights in this situation. The words were harsh, final. This is between me and Victor. Territory politics, power dynamics. Things that have nothing to do with sisterly affection and everything to do with survival. You being there would only complicate matters. I'm already the complication. At least let me try to fix it. You can't fix this. Dominic's voice softened slightly, which somehow made it worse. The best thing you can do is trust me to handle it. Trust you? I barely know you. You know me well enough. You know I keep my word. You know I protect what's mine. And whether you like it or not, Lena, you became mine the moment I carried your aunt out of that apartment. He moved to the elevator, pressed the call button. Go home, stay there. I'll contact you when it's done. And if it goes badly, if Victor, then you'll hear about it on the news. The elevator doors opened. Marcus will have someone watching your building. Don't try to leave. Don't try to contact Victor. Don't do anything except wait. It wasn't a request. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to fight, wanted to do anything except stand there helplessly while men decided her fate without her input. But she recognized the futility of it. Whatever was going to happen tonight would happen whether she approved or not. She stepped into the elevator and the doors closed on Dominic's face, determined, dangerous, and carrying the weight of decisions that would reshape everything. The warehouse district at night was exactly as miserable as its reputation suggested. Abandoned buildings and broken streetlights, the kind of place where deals got made and bodies got buried. Dominic arrived 15 minutes early with Marcus and 4 other men, all armed, all experienced enough to handle whatever Victor might bring. Building 17 was a shell of its former industrial glory, empty except for pigeons and old machinery. They'd swept it twice, found nothing, and now Dominic stood in the center of the space waiting while his men positioned themselves strategically. Not an ambush, that would be too obvious, just insurance. Victor arrived exactly on time. He came with 6 men, which was 2 more than Dominic had anticipated, but not enough to constitute a genuine threat. Victor Hart was a big man, 6'3" and built like violence, with dark hair and darker eyes, and the kind of presence that made rooms feel smaller. He moved like a predator, confident and controlled, assessing threats automatically. The brothers could have been carved from the same stone, both commanders, both ruthless, both too smart to make the first move in a confrontation that could end with the city burning. Vale! Victor's voice was surprisingly cultured for a man with his reputation. Hart, thanks for meeting. Let's skip the pleasantries. You know why I'm here. Your sister. My sister. Victor moved closer, his men fanning out but staying back. Who's apparently been working for you for the past 3 weeks. Who's been in your home, at your events, integrated into your life in ways that require explanation. She needed money. I provided employment. Simple business transaction. Nothing about you is simple, Vale, and nothing about my sister is business. Most of Victor's eyes were cold. So I'm going to ask you directly, what's your play here? What do you want with Lena? Dominic had prepared for this question, had spent hours considering angles and approaches, weighing truth against strategy. In the end, he decided that the only lie Victor might believe was the one with truth at its core. She's not just an employee, Dominic said quietly. Not anymore. The silence that followed was deadly. Victor's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air, violence coiling, potential energy waiting to be released. Explain. She came to me in debt, desperate, trying to protect you from knowing how bad things had gotten. I could have handled it purely as business, bought the debt, put her to work, collected what she owed, and moved on. But that's not what happened. What happened? I got involved, personally, in ways I don't usually allow. Dominic held Victor's gaze. Your sister is stubborn, fierce, smarter than she gives herself credit for. She doesn't back down. She doesn't take the easy road. And somewhere between watching her work and listening to her argue with me, I stopped seeing her as a debt to be collected and started seeing her as something else entirely. Something else. Victor's voice was dangerously soft. You're going to need to be more specific. I'm protecting her. From Kozlov. From anyone else who might see her as leverage. And I'm doing it not because of territory politics or strategic advantage, but because I want to. You want to. Victor laughed, sharp and humorless. Dominic Vale doesn't do anything because he wants to. Everything you do is calculated, strategic, designed to expand your power. So tell me the real reason before I decide that killing you is worth the war it'll start. Dominic could feel his men tensing, could sense Marcus calculating angles and exit strategies. This was the moment, the hinge point where everything either settled or exploded. The real reason, Dominic said slowly, is that when I found your aunt bleeding on her apartment floor, when I carried her out knowing someone had hurt her because of a debt your sister owed, something in me snapped. I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of, Hart. I've hurt people, destroyed lives, built an empire on other people's suffering, but I drew a line a long time ago about civilians, about people who can't fight back, and someone crossed that line. So this is about revenge? About making someone pay? It started that way. It became something else. Dominic paused. Your sister looks at me like I'm human instead of a weapon. She argues with me. She calls me on my bullshit. She's not afraid of me the way she should be, and I'm not sure if that makes her brave or insane. But it makes her interesting, and I haven't been interested in anything except power for a very long time. Victor studied him with the intensity of a man who'd survived this long by reading people accurately. You're telling me you have feelings for my sister. I'm telling you she matters to me. How much, I'm still figuring out, but enough that I'm standing here having this conversation instead of just taking what I want and dealing with the consequences. The consequences would be war. I know. You'd lose people. I'd lose people. The city would burn. I know that too. And you're willing to risk it? For a woman you've known less than a month? Dominic thought about Lena's defiant eyes, about her refusal to be helpless, about the way she moved through his penthouse like she belonged there, about the way she'd looked at him during that dinner party, seeing through all his carefully constructed masks straight to the man underneath. Yes, he said simply. Victor was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of decisions made in impossible circumstances. I've kept Lena at arm's length for years. Gave her money, tried to set her up with legitimate work, offered her every protection I could provide. She refused it all. Do you know why? Because she wanted freedom. Because she was afraid of becoming like me, of being contaminated by my world, my choices, my violence. Victor's expression was bleak. And now you're telling me she's walked straight into your world instead, that she's chosen your protection over mine. She didn't choose. Circumstances forced her hand. Circumstances you created by buying her debt, by making yourself the only option available. Victor moved closer, close enough that Dominic could see the fury and pain warring in his eyes. You trapped my sister, Vale. You call it protection, but it's still a cage. Maybe, but it's a cage with an exit. 6 months, her debt is clear, she can walk away. Those were always the terms. And when 6 months is up, when she's integrated into your life, when she knows too much, when walking away means leaving behind something that matters, what happens then? It was the question Dominic had been avoiding, the one he didn't have a clean answer for. Because Victor was right. Lena was already in too deep, knew too much, mattered too much. Letting her walk away in 6 months would be dangerous for her and complicated for him, and neither of them were naive enough to pretend otherwise. Then we'll figure it out together, Dominic said. But that's between me and her, not me and you. Everything about my sister is between me and you. She's family, my responsibility, my blood. Victor's voice dropped to something lethal. You hurt her, Vale, in any way, for any reason, and our understanding is over. Territory agreements, peace treaties, everything we've built to keep this city stable, gone, and I will burn your empire to the ground with you still inside it. Understood. I mean it. I've killed men for less than looking at her wrong. You think I won't go to war over actual harm? I think you will, which is why I'm being honest with you now, instead of hiding it and hoping you wouldn't notice. Dominic held his ground. I'm not asking your permission, Hart. I'm informing you of the situation and giving you the choice of how to respond. Accept it or don't. But either way, Lena stays under my protection until she decides otherwise. Victor's hand moved to his weapon. Dominic didn't flinch. Around them, 12 men tensed for violence that would leave bodies on both sides. And then Victor laughed. It was unexpected enough that everyone froze. Victor shook his head, something between amusement and resignation crossing his face. You've got stones, I'll give you that. Standing here telling me you've got feelings for my sister while basically daring me to do something about it. He pulled his hand away from his weapon. Most men would have lied, would have tried to play it off as pure business, nothing personal. Please don't kill me. I'm not most men. No, you're really not. Victor studied him with new assessment. Lena would hate this conversation, you know, hate us discussing her like she's property to be negotiated over. She already does. I can practically hear her screaming from across the city. Good. That fury means she's still herself, that she hasn't been broken down into someone manageable. Victor stepped back, the immediate threat of violence dissipating. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to treat my sister with respect. You're going to keep her safe from Kozlov and anyone else who might see her as leverage. And you're going to remember that if this ends badly, if she gets hurt because of your world, your choices, your enemies, I'll answer for it, I know. Do you? Because I'm not talking about territory wars or political consequences. I'm talking about personal revenge, the kind that doesn't care about collateral damage or long-term strategy, the kind that just wants blood. I understand. Victor nodded slowly. Then we have an understanding. Lena is yours to protect, but she's still mine to avenge if necessary. Fair enough. They stood there for another moment, two predators acknowledging each other's territory, establishing boundaries through threat and negotiation. Then Victor gestured to his men, and they began filing out of the warehouse. At the door, Victor paused and looked back. Vale? One more thing. Yeah? Lena's stronger than she looks, tougher than you probably realize. But she's also been hurt more than she admits. By our parents dying, by foster care, by the system that separated us, by me trying to protect her in ways that felt like control. So if you're going to do this, if you're really going to let her matter, then don't half-ass it. Don't protect her just enough to keep her safe, but not enough to let her be free. Give her real choices, real agency, or don't do it at all. I'll keep that in mind. You'd better, Victor smiled, sharp and dangerous. Because if you break my sister's heart, Dominic, I won't kill you quickly. I'll make it educational. He left before Dominic could respond, his men following like shadows. Marcus materialized at Dominic's elbow. That went better than expected. Did it? We're all still alive. That's better than expected. Marcus holstered his weapon. What now? Now I go tell Lena what just happened and deal with the fact that she's going to be furious I had this conversation without her. Good luck with that. Yeah. Dominic started toward the exit. I'm going to need it. Lena was pacing her apartment when the knock came. She'd been pacing for 3 hours, phone clutched in her hand, alternating between fury and fear and the terrible certainty that something had gone catastrophically wrong. The man outside her door was one of Marcus's people, professional and blank-faced. Mr. Vale would like to see you. Did something happen? He's fine. Everyone's fine. He's waiting in the car. Lena grabbed her jacket and followed him down to where a black Mercedes idled at the curb. Dominic sat in the back seat, tie loosened, looking tired but intact. She climbed in beside him, and the car pulled away before she could even close the door properly. Well, she demanded. We talked. We reached an understanding. No war. The relief was so intense it made her dizzy. What kind of understanding? The kind where your brother knows about us, accepts it with conditions, and has promised to kill me very slowly if I hurt you. About us. Lena's voice was flat. There is no us. I told him there was. It was the only explanation that made sense. You had no right. I had every right. This was about preventing a war, Lena. About keeping both of us alive. About making sure your brother didn't tear this city apart, trying to protect you from something you'd already chosen. I didn't choose you. I chose survival. Same thing in this world. Dominic turned to face her fully. Victor knows you're working for me. He knows you're in my protection. He knows this has become personal, and he's accepted it because the alternative was violence neither of us wanted. What did you tell him exactly? The truth, that you matter to me, that I'm protecting you not because of business but because I want to. That somewhere in this past month, this stopped being about debt and started being about something else. Lena felt like the car was shrinking, the air getting thin. That's not true. Isn't it? Dominic's eyes were dark, intense. You think I buy everyone's debt? You think I personally intervene in every employee's problems? You think I let just anyone into my space, my life, my world? You did it for Maria. I did it for you. Maria was the excuse. You were the reason. He reached out, caught her hand before she could pull away. I'm not good at this, Lena, at being honest about things that aren't strategy or power. But Victor was right about one thing. If I'm going to do this, I need to do it honestly. So here's the truth. You've gotten under my skin, into my head, into places I thought I'd locked down years ago. And I don't know what to do about it except keep you close and figure it out as we go. I don't want to be figured out. I want to pay my debt and get my life back. What life? The one where you're working 3 jobs and still drowning, where you're lying to your family and avoiding your brother, where you're one emergency away from another disaster? Dominic's grip tightened. I'm offering you something different, something better, if you're brave enough to take it. It's not bravery. It's surrender. Maybe. Or maybe it's the smartest choice you'll ever make. He released her hand. Think about it. You have until Friday to decide if you're staying or walking away. If you walk, I'll clear your debt anyway. Call it a gift. Call it insurance. Call it whatever you need to call it. But you'll be free. Lena stared at him, trying to process the offer, the implications, the impossible choice he was laying at her feet. And if I stay? Then we figure out what this is. Together. No more pretending it's just business. No more careful boundaries and professional distance. We see where it goes. That's insane. Probably. Dominic smiled, tired and genuine. But I've built an empire on insane decisions. Why stop now? The car pulled up to her building. Lena sat there for a long moment, hand on the door handle, balanced between 2 impossible futures. Then she opened the door and stepped out into the night air. Friday, she said. I'll give you my answer Friday. I'll be waiting. She walked into her building without looking back, climbed stairs that felt steeper than usual, and locked herself in an apartment that suddenly felt too small for everything she was carrying. Outside, Dominic watched her window light up, watched her shadow move behind curtains, and wondered what the hell he'd just done. He'd survived 2 decades in a world that ate the weak and crushed the careless by never letting anyone close enough to matter. And now he'd just handed Lena Hart the power to destroy him with a single choice. Smart? No. Strategic? Absolutely not. Necessary? Apparently. Because somewhere between carrying Maria out of that apartment and watching Lena argue with him in his own penthouse, Dominic Vale had discovered something worse than weakness. He'd discovered wanting something more than power, and there was no going back from that. Friday arrived wrapped in fog and consequence. Lena woke before dawn, stared at her ceiling, and tried to convince herself she hadn't already made her decision 3 days ago in the back of that Mercedes. She'd spent the intervening time in a haze of routine, working her shifts at the brass mill, avoiding Aunt Maria's too knowing looks, ignoring the 17 texts from a number she recognized as Victor's. The only person she'd actually spoken to was herself, in the mirror, rehearsing speeches about self-preservation and boundaries, and all the very good reasons why walking away was the smart choice. None of them sounded convincing even to her own ears. At 7:45, she stood in front of her closet trying to decide what you wore to potentially surrender your life to a crime boss. Professional? Too cold. Casual? Too dismissive. In the end, she chose jeans and a sweater that made her feel armored in softness, like she could absorb whatever was coming. The Mercedes arrived at 8 sharp. Different driver this time, a woman in her 40s who introduced herself as Chen and drove with the kind of precision that suggested military training. They didn't talk. Lena was grateful for the silence. The penthouse was different when she stepped off the elevator. Softer somehow, though nothing had physically changed. Morning light poured through those massive windows, turning the city below into something almost beautiful. Dominic stood in the kitchen making coffee, wearing jeans and a black t-shirt that made him look younger, more human, more dangerous in ways she hadn't prepared for. He looked up when she entered, and something passed between them. Acknowledgement, anticipation, the weight of a choice about to be made. Coffee? He offered. Sure. He poured 2 cups, handed her one, and they stood there in his kitchen like normal people having a normal morning instead of 2 survivors negotiating the terms of something neither of them fully understood. I've been thinking, Lena said finally. Dangerous habit. About what you said. About wanting me to stay. About this being more than business. She wrapped her hands around the warm cup. I need to understand what that means, specifically, not in vague terms or strategic implications, but in actual reality. Dominic leaned against the counter, considering. That's fair. What do you want to know? Everything. What you expect from me, what this arrangement actually looks like, whether you're asking me to be your employee or your... She couldn't quite say the word. Or my what, Lena? I don't know. That's the problem. I don't know what you're offering, and I can't agree to something I don't understand. He was quiet for a moment, and she could see him choosing words carefully, weighing truth against strategy. When he spoke, his voice was stripped of its usual calculated distance. I'm offering you a place in my life. Not as an employee, though you can keep working if you want the structure of it. Not as a possession, though people will assume that's what you are. As someone who matters. Someone I protect because I want to, not because of debt or obligation or strategic advantage. He paused. I'm offering you the truth of who I am, what I do, the empire I've built, and the cost I've paid for it. And I'm asking if you can live with that truth without trying to change it or save me from it. I don't want to save you. Good. Because I'm not looking for salvation. I'm looking for someone who can stand beside me in this world I've made and not flinch from what that means. What does it mean? It means violence. Not against you, never against you, but in service of protecting what's mine. It means moral ambiguity and decisions that other people would call monstrous. It means being connected to someone the world sees as a criminal and dealing with the consequences of that association. His eyes held hers. It means choosing me knowing exactly what I am, not some fantasy version you hope I might become. Lena set down her coffee cup, her hands needing something to do that wasn't trembling. And what do you want from me in return? Honesty. Loyalty. Your time and your trust. The right to know you're safe, to have you in my space, to claim you publicly as mine. He moved closer. I want you to stop working yourself to death trying to prove you don't need help. I want you to let me give you the security you've never had. And I want to know that when you look at me, you see the man, not just the monster. Those things aren't separate, Dominic. The man and the monster are the same person. I know. That's why I'm asking if you can handle both. The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Lena thought about the past month, about Dominic carrying Aunt Maria to safety, about him standing between her and Kozlov's collectors, about the way he'd been honest with Victor instead of hiding behind lies. She thought about his penthouse library full of philosophy books, his careful kindness toward Maria, the way he never pretended to be anything other than what he was. She thought about going back to her old life, the scrambling and fear and constant sense of drowning, the freedom that felt more like abandonment than liberation. I need ground rules, she said. Something like relief flickered across his face. Name them. First, I keep my apartment, my space, somewhere that's mine even if I'm spending time here. Agreed. Second, no lies. If you're going to do something that affects me, territory politics, meetings with my brother, anything, I want to know about it, even if you think it's protecting me. That one's harder. Sometimes protection requires information control. Then we're going to have problems. Dominic studied her, weighing the cost of honesty against the alternative. All right. No lies. I'll tell you what's happening even when it's ugly. Third, my brother stays out of this. Whatever happens between us, Victor doesn't get a vote. He already weighed in on that. But yes, what happens between us is between us. Fourth, she took a breath. This doesn't touch my work at the brass mill. I need something that's just mine, that isn't connected to you or this world. Can I have that? Do you need it? Financially, I mean, because the money, it's not about money. It's about keeping part of myself separate, about not losing everything I was before I met you. He was quiet for a long moment. That's going to be complicated. People who want to hurt me will look for leverage. Your job makes you visible, accessible, vulnerable. Then we figure out how to make it safe. But I'm not giving up every piece of my independence. All right, you keep the job, but you accept security, someone watching, someone ready to intervene if there's trouble. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to insist she didn't need protection, but she remembered Kozlov's collectors, remembered Aunt Maria's broken arm, remembered that agreeing to this meant accepting that she was now a target. Okay, she said quietly, security, but discreet. I'm not walking around with obvious bodyguards. Marcus has people who can blend in. Dominic moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. Any other conditions? Just one. If I do this, if I stay, I need to know it's real. Not strategy, not long-term planning, not some elaborate move in whatever game you're playing with the city. Real feelings, real connection, real risk on both sides. You think I'd fabricate this? That I'd go through all of this for strategy? I think you're very good at making calculated decisions look like emotional ones. I think you've survived this long by never letting anything matter more than control. She held his gaze. So I'm asking you directly, Dominic, is this real, or am I just another piece on your chessboard? The silence stretched between them, taut and fragile. Outside the windows, the city continued its usual Friday morning chaos. Traffic and construction and a million people living lives that would never intersect with theirs. Inside this penthouse, time seemed suspended, waiting for an answer that would determine everything. It's real, Dominic said finally, his voice rough with something that might have been fear. Too real. More real than anything I've allowed myself to feel in 20 years. And it terrifies me because I don't know how to do this. How to care about someone more than I care about control. How to make space for something I can't manipulate or manage or predict. He reached out, cupped her face with hands that could destroy and protect in equal measure. You asked what I want from you. I want you to stay even though every instinct you have is probably screaming to run. I want you to trust me even though I'm exactly the kind of man you should never trust. And I want you to take this leap knowing I'm taking it too. Lena felt tears prick her eyes. Not from sadness, but from the sheer, overwhelming weight of the moment. She'd spent so much of her life alone, Independent out of necessity rather than choice. Keeping everyone at a distance because letting them close always meant getting hurt. And now here was Dominic Vale, crime boss and killer and broken man, offering her something she'd never thought she wanted. Partnership, protection, the terrifying vulnerability of being seen. "Okay," she whispered, "I'll stay." His kiss was gentle at first, questioning, careful, giving her room to change her mind. But when she leaned into it, when her hands came up to grip his shoulders, something shifted. The gentleness gave way to hunger, to the release of a month's worth of tension and careful distance, to the acknowledgement that they'd both been holding back from something inevitable. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "No going back now," he said. "I know. Your brother is going to have opinions. Let him. This is my choice. The city's going to talk. Let them talk. And there will be consequences. People who'll see you as weakness, who'll try to use you against me. Then we deal with it together." Lena pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "You said you wanted honesty and trust. That goes both ways. You have to trust me to handle what comes." "I'm working on it." She smiled despite everything. "Work faster." The rest of Friday passed in a strange domesticity. Dominic had calls to make, business to handle, the usual machinery of his empire to maintain. Lena cleaned without it feeling like work, made lunch that they ate together, gradually claimed small spaces in the penthouse as her own. It felt like playing house, except the house was a fortress, and the man she was playing with could order someone's death with a phone call. By evening, the fog had burned off, leaving the city sharp and clear in the twilight. They stood at the windows watching lights begin to glow across the urban landscape, Dominic's arm around her waist like it had always belonged there. "I should warn you," he said quietly. "There's an event tomorrow night. Business dinner, important clients, the kind of thing where appearances matter. You want me there?" "I want you at all of them. As my partner, not my employee. That means people knowing who you are to me, what you mean, that touching you is the same as declaring war. That's a lot of pressure for a second date." "Is that what this is? A date?" "I don't know what else to call it." Lena leaned into him. "What should I wear?" "I'll have something sent over. Designer, appropriate, the kind of thing that makes a statement." "What statement?" "That you're mine. That I'm serious. That anyone looking for weakness should look elsewhere because you're the exact opposite." The possessiveness should have bothered her, should have triggered all her instincts about independence and autonomy. Instead, it felt like safety, like finally having someone claim her publicly instead of hiding their connection in shadows. "Okay," she said. "Tomorrow night. I'll be ready." What she didn't say was that she had no idea how to be ready for this, for being claimed by Dominic Vale in front of the city's power players, for stepping fully into a world she'd only glimpsed from the edges. But she'd learned a long time ago that you didn't wait until you were ready. You just jumped and figured out how to land on the way down. Tomorrow came with champagne and consequences. The dress arrived at noon. Midnight blue silk that hugged every curve. Elegant without being provocative. Expensive enough to make a statement without screaming it. Shoes that added 3 inches to her height. Jewelry that was probably worth more than her car. An entire transformation packaged in tissue paper and designer boxes. Lena stared at it all spread across her bed, feeling like Cinderella, except the ball was run by criminals, and the prince had blood on his hands. Her phone buzzed. Victor. She'd been avoiding his calls all week, but apparently her brother had reached his limit. She answered before she could talk herself out of it. "Hi, Victor." "Don't hi, Victor me. I've been trying to reach you for days." "I've been busy." "Busy with Dominic Vale? Because that's what I'm hearing, that you two are, that he's claiming you publicly tonight at the Meridian dinner." Word traveled fast. "He is. I'm going with him." Silence. Then, carefully controlled. "Lena, do you understand what that means? Going public with him isn't just about you two dating. It's a political statement. It's you being marked as his in front of everyone who matters in this city." "I know." "And you're okay with that?" "I am." More silence. She could almost hear Victor processing, calculating, trying to figure out how to protect her from a choice she'd already made. "He's not a good man, Lena." "Neither are you, technically." I'm your brother. That's different. I'm allowed to be a hypocrite about your safety. His voice softened. I just want to make sure you're choosing this with full knowledge. Dominic told me it was personal, but I need to hear from you that it's what you want. Lena thought about lying, about softening the truth to ease her brother's concern. But Dominic had promised honesty, and she owed Victor the same. I'm choosing him, Victor. Knowing what he is, what he does, all of it. I'm choosing him because he sees me, really sees me, and doesn't try to protect me from my own decisions. Because he's honest about the darkness instead of pretending it doesn't exist. And because for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm choosing something instead of just surviving what gets chosen for me. That's either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. Victor laughed, tired and fond. Yeah, probably. Just be careful, okay? And know that if he hurts you, if any of this goes wrong, I'm still your brother. That doesn't change. I know, thank you. She hung up feeling lighter, like she'd cleared some essential hurdle. Victor knew. Victor accepted it, or was trying to. That was enough. At 6:30, the Mercedes arrived. At 7, Lena stepped off the elevator into Dominic's penthouse wearing midnight blue and borrowed confidence. He was waiting in the living room, devastating in a black tuxedo that made him look like violence wrapped in elegance. His eyes tracked over her slowly, thoroughly, with an appreciation that made her skin warm. You're going to cause a riot looking like that, he said. Good. Let them riot. He crossed to her, offered his arm like they were attending an actual ball instead of a gathering of criminals and corrupt officials. Ready? Absolutely not. Let's go anyway. The Meridian occupied the top floor of the city's most expensive hotel, all floor-to-ceiling windows and crystal chandeliers, and the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Dominic's arrival caused the subtle shift of attention that suggested everyone knew exactly who he was and what he represented. But it was Lena on his arm that caused the real stir. She felt the stares, heard the whispers, saw the rapid recalculation happening across dozens of faces. Dominic Vale had never brought anyone to these events, had never publicly claimed a partner. And now here he was with Victor Hart's sister, making a statement that echoed through the room like a gunshot. Breathe, Dominic murmured near her ear. They're just people. People who could have me killed with a phone call. People who wouldn't dare because you're with me. His hand tightened on hers. You're safe here, Lena. I promise. The evening unfolded like careful choreography. Dominic introduced her to city council members and business owners, to men who ran legitimate empires and men whose fortunes came from darker sources. Each introduction was deliberate, each conversation a small power play, each moment designed to establish exactly where Lena fit in this hierarchy, not as decoration, not as weakness, as his partner. Around 9, Marcus appeared at Dominic's elbow with a quiet message. Dominic's expression shifted, not quite concern, but heightened alertness. I need to handle something, he told Lena. Stay with Marcus. I'll be back in 10 minutes. What's wrong? Probably nothing, just someone who needs reminding about boundaries. He kissed her forehead, casual and possessive. Stay here. Don't wander. He disappeared into a back hallway with 2 of his men. Lena stood there awkwardly, champagne in hand, trying to look comfortable while Marcus loomed nearby like a particularly well-dressed wall. That's when she saw him. Tall, expensive suit, dead eyes she recognized from the restaurant 3 weeks ago. One of Kozlov's collectors. The one Dominic had called Dead Eyes in her head. He was watching her from across the room with an expression that made her blood run cold. Marcus noticed her tension. Miss Hart? That man, by the bar. He works for Kozlov. Marcus's hand moved subtly toward his jacket. Stay close to me. But Deadeyes was already moving, cutting through the crowd with purpose. He stopped 10 feet away, close enough to talk without raising his voice. Far enough that it didn't look like confrontation. Lena Hart, he said pleasantly. Funny seeing you here? I'm here with Dominic Vale. You should leave. Should I? Because from where I'm standing, you're just standing around while your boyfriend handles business. Makes me wonder how serious he really is about protecting you. Marcus stepped forward. You need to go. Now. I'm just talking. No harm in talking. Deadeyes smiled, shark-like. I wanted to tell Miss Hart that Anton Kozlov was very disappointed to hear about her arrangement with Vale. Felt like there was unfinished business, you know? Debt paid doesn't mean debt forgiven. The debt was transferred legally. Legally doesn't mean much in our world, sweetheart. And Anton has a long memory. So here's a friendly warning. Vale can't protect you everywhere, all the time. Eventually, he'll slip up. And when he does, we'll be there to finish that conversation we started. Lena felt fear spike through her, but under it was something else. Fury. She'd spent a month being afraid, being careful, letting other people determine her fate. She was done with it. Tell Anton Kozlov, she said, voice steady despite her racing heart, that if he comes near me or anyone I care about, he won't be dealing with Dominic Vale. He'll be dealing with Victor Hart, and I promise you, my brother is significantly less reasonable about people threatening his family. Deadeye's smile faltered. The Hart name carried weight, and invoking Victor's protection was dangerous but effective. You're playing a risky game, little girl. I stopped playing games the moment you people put my aunt in the hospital. This isn't a game. It's a promise. Stay away from me or find out exactly how seriously my brother takes family. For a moment, she thought Deadeye's might escalate. Then Dominic's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Is there a problem here? He'd returned silently, flanked by Marcus's team, positioning himself between Lena and Deadeye's with the casual certainty of a predator protecting his territory. Deadeye's raised his hands in mock surrender. Just having a friendly conversation? No problem at all. Good. Because if there was a problem, I'd hate to have to explain to Anton why one of his collectors disappeared during a charity event. Dominic's voice was pleasant, conversational, absolutely lethal. You should leave now, before I change my mind about letting you walk out. Deadeye's went. Quickly. The room had gone quiet, everyone pretending not to watch while absolutely watching. Dominic turned to Lena, concern bleeding through his controlled expression. Are you okay? I'm fine. I handled it. I heard. Invoking Victor was smart. He touched her face gently. But I should have been here. You can't be everywhere. I can protect myself. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to. He turned to Marcus. I want surveillance on Kozlov's operation doubled. If they sneeze wrong, I want to know about it. And find out how he got an invitation to this event. Someone made a mistake, and I want to know who. They left the Meridian 20 minutes later, the evening effectively over. In the car, Lena finally let herself shake, not from fear, but from adrenaline come down, from the reality of what had almost happened, from the recognition that this was her life now. Dominic pulled her close. I'm sorry. For what? For bringing you into this. For making you a target. For putting you in situations where men like that think they can threaten you. You didn't make me a target. I was already in trouble. You just made it complicated. She leaned into him, and I meant what I said earlier. We deal with it together. That includes the ugly parts. Lena, I need you to understand something. What happened tonight? That's going to happen again. Different people, different threats, but the same basic reality. You're with me, which means you're in this world whether you want to be or not, and that world doesn't forgive mistakes. I know. Do you? Because you stood up to a killer tonight like you were invincible, like you couldn't be hurt. I stood up to him because I refuse to be afraid anymore, because I'm tired of letting other people's violence determine my choices. She pulled back to meet his eyes. You asked me to be honest about what I could handle. I'm telling you I can handle this, but you have to trust me to know my own limits. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Your limits concern me less than mine do. What do you mean? I mean that if Kozlov had actually hurt you tonight, I would have burned his entire operation to the ground without caring about the consequences. Territory agreements, peace treaties, the careful balance I've spent years maintaining, all of it would have meant nothing compared to making him pay. His voice was raw. That kind of reaction isn't strategic, Lena. It's weakness. And in my world, weakness gets you killed. Or maybe it's just being human, caring about someone enough to be irrational about their safety. Same thing, where I come from. The car pulled up to Lena's apartment building. She should have gotten out, should have gone upstairs to her own space, maintained some independence. Instead, she heard herself say, "Come up with me." Lena, please. I don't want to be alone tonight. Dominic studied her face, seeing things she wasn't sure she wanted to reveal. Then he nodded, told the driver to wait, and followed her up 3 flights of stairs that smelled like mildew and somebody's burnt dinner. Her apartment was tiny compared to his penthouse. 1 bedroom, a kitchen the size of a closet, furniture that had seen better decades. But it was hers, and bringing him into it felt like sharing something more intimate than kisses or confessions. Dominic looked around with careful attention, taking in the books on her shelves, the photos of Aunt Maria, the blanket her mother had made before she died. He touched nothing, just observed, learning her through her space. "This is where you come when you need to remember who you are," he said quietly. "How did you know?" "Because I understand the need for separation, for having something that's just yours." He turned to face her. "Thank you for letting me see it." Lena kicked off her shoes, suddenly exhausted. "Stay, just for tonight. We don't have to. I just don't want to be alone." "Okay." They ended up on her couch, still dressed in their evening finery, watching the city lights through her window. Dominic held her like she might break, and Lena let herself be held like she wasn't afraid of breaking. "What happens now?" she asked eventually. "Now we see if Kozlov was just making noise or if he's actually stupid enough to push this. Now we adjust security, tighten protocols, make sure you're protected, even when I can't be there. Now we figure out how to balance your independence with keeping you alive." Sounds exhausting. It is, but you're worth it. The simplicity of the statement broke something open in her chest. She turned in his arms, kissed him with all the fear and fury and desperate hope she'd been carrying. And when he kissed her back, gentle despite the violence in his hands, careful despite the chaos in his world, Lena understood what she'd actually agreed to. Not just protection, not just partnership, but the terrifying, exhilarating vulnerability of being loved by someone who'd forgotten how until she'd made him remember. They fell asleep there on her couch, tangled together in expensive clothes and borrowed time, while outside the city continued its usual dance of commerce and crime. And somewhere in the darkness, Anton Kozlov received a report about the evening's confrontation and began making plans of his own. The war they'd been trying to avoid was coming whether they wanted it or not. But for now, in this moment, Dominic and Lena had each other. And that would have to be enough. The call came at 3 a.m, shattering the fragile peace they'd built. Dominic's phone vibrated against Lena's coffee table, the sound too loud in the quiet apartment. He was awake instantly, years of survival instinct overriding exhaustion. Lena stirred beside him as he reached for the phone, Marcus's name glowing on the screen. "Talk to me." Marcus's voice was tight, controlled, carrying news that made Dominic's entire body go rigid. "Kozlov just hit one of our distribution centers, burned it to the ground. 3 of our people are dead, 2 more in critical condition. He left a message spray-painted on the wall. Payment for disrespect." Lena was fully awake now, reading Dominic's expression in the dim light filtering through her windows. She watched him transform from the man who'd held her gently to the crime boss who'd built an empire on calculated violence. "Where's he now?" Dominic's voice was ice. "We're tracking him. He's got maybe a 20-minute head start. But Dominic, there's more. We intercepted communications. This isn't just retaliation for the debt transfer. He's been planning this for weeks, building alliances, positioning himself to take your northern territory. The Lena situation was just an excuse to accelerate the timeline." "Who's backing him?" "We're still working on that, but whoever it is has serious resources. This was coordinated, professional, not Kozlov's usual sloppy work." Dominic was already moving, standing up, checking the weapon he always carried, switching into the mode that had kept him alive for 2 decades. "Mobilize everyone. I want full defensive positions on all critical holdings. And Marcus, find out who's funding this. Follow the money, break whoever you need to break, but get me a name." "What about Miss Hart?" Dominic looked at Lena, still sitting on the couch in her midnight blue dress, watching him with clear eyes that saw everything and flinched from nothing. "She stays with me. If Kozlov's escalating, she's not safe anywhere else." He ended the call and turned to face her fully. "Get dressed, comfortable clothes, shoes you can move in. We're leaving in 5 minutes." "Where are we going?" "Somewhere secure while I handle this." "Handle what exactly? Dominic, what's happening?" He could have lied, could have softened it, packaged it in careful language that protected her from the ugliest truths. But he'd promised honesty, and that promise mattered more than his instinct to shield her. Kozlov just declared war. He hit one of my operations, killed my people, and made it clear this isn't over, which means I need to end it before it gets worse. He moved to her, cupped her face. And I need you somewhere he can't reach you while I do what needs to be done. I'm not hiding while you go to war. You're not hiding. You're being strategic. There's a difference. Dominic, Lena, please. I can't think clearly if I'm worried about you. I can't make the decisions I need to make if part of my mind is calculating whether you're safe. So I'm asking you to trust me enough to let me protect you while I handle this. She wanted to argue. He could see it in her eyes, the stubborn independence warring with pragmatic recognition that she'd be a liability in what was coming. Finally, she nodded and went to change. 10 minutes later, they were in the Mercedes with Chen driving and 2 additional vehicles following. Dominic made calls while the city blurred past, his voice calm and precise as he gave orders that would reshape the criminal landscape before sunrise. "Where are you taking me?" Lena asked when he finally put down the phone. "A safe house. Private, secure, stocked for extended stays if necessary. You'll have everything you need and Marcus's best people watching the perimeter." "How long?" "As long as it takes to finish this." The safe house turned out to be a converted warehouse in an industrial area, unremarkable from the outside but sophisticated within. Clean, modern, equipped with security systems that probably cost more than Lena's annual salary. Dominic walked her through quickly, showed her where everything was, introduced her to the 4 guards who would be maintaining watch. At the door, he pulled her close one more time. "I need you to stay here. No matter what you hear, no matter what gets reported, you stay inside these walls until I come for you. Promise me." "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done the moment Kozlov threatened you. I'm going to remove him as a problem, permanently." His eyes were dark, resolved. "This is the part you don't get to see, Lena. The part that makes me the monster people say I am. I need to know you can accept that version of me exists without trying to stop it." Lena thought about the past month, about everything that had led to this moment, about the choice she'd made to stay, knowing exactly what Dominic was, about the fact that Kozlov had killed 3 people tonight and would kill more if given the chance. "I'm not going to pretend I understand your world completely," she said slowly, "but I understand survival. I understand that some threats don't respond to mercy. So go do what you need to do. Just come back to me when it's done." He kissed her then, hard and desperate, like he was memorizing the taste of her. Then he was gone, and Lena was alone with guards, and silence, and the terrible waiting that came with loving a dangerous man. Dawn came cold and gray, painting the city in shades of ash. Dominic stood in a warehouse across town, surrounded by his inner circle, looking at the man tied to a chair in the center of the room. Not Kozlov, not yet, but one of his lieutenants, a man named Sergei, who handled logistics and had made the mistake of being findable. "Tell me who's funding him," Dominic said quietly. Sergei spat blood. "Go to hell." Marcus hit him again, precise and efficient. They'd been at this for an hour, and Sergei was weakening but still defiant. Dominic respected that, in a distant way. Loyalty was valuable even when it was misplaced. "Sergei, I'm going to be honest with you. You're going to tell me what I need to know. The only question is how much you suffer first. So let's skip the part where you pretend you're brave enough to die for Anton Kozlov and get to the part where you give me information in exchange for a quick end." "You think you're untouchable, Vale? You think you're the only one with power in this city?" Sergei laughed, bitter and broken. "Anton's got backing you can't touch. People so far above your territory disputes that you're just insects to them." "Names, Sergei. Give me names." "Why? So you can go after them too? You're one man, Vale. You can't fight everyone." "Watch me." Another hour of careful, calculated pressure, and Sergei finally broke. The name he gave made everyone in the room go silent. Thomas Brennan, federal prosecutor, decorated career, currently running for state attorney general on a platform of cleaning up organized crime. The kind of man who should have been untouchable, whose involvement suggested this was bigger than a simple territory dispute. "Brennan's been working with Kozlov?" Marcus's voice was disbelieving. Why would a prosecutor help a criminal? Because he's not trying to clean up crime, Dominic said slowly, pieces falling into place. He's trying to consolidate it. Take out the independent operators like me and Victor. Leave only the criminals he controls. Create a system he can manipulate from the inside. He looked at Sergei. How long has this been going on? 6 months. Brennan approached Anton, offered protection and resources in exchange for helping eliminate the competition. Said he wanted the city's criminal element under proper management. Sergei coughed blood. You were always the primary target. Anton was just the tool. Dominic processed this with cold clarity. A federal prosecutor using criminals to eliminate other criminals, positioning himself as both the problem and the solution, building a power base that would make him untouchable. It was brilliant and monstrous in equal measure. And it meant this wasn't a war he could win through traditional means. Where's Kozlov now? He asked. I don't know. He moves around, never stays in one place. But he's planning something big for tonight. Said it would force your hand, make you react emotionally instead of strategically. Ice flooded Dominic's veins. What's he planning? I don't know the details. Just that it involves your weakness. The girl. Dominic had his phone out before Sergei finished speaking, calling the safe house, each ring stretching into eternity. One of the guards answered. Status report, now. All quiet here, sir. Miss Hart is secure. No movement on the perimeter. Increase security to maximum. No one in or out without my direct authorization. I'm sending additional teams. He hung up and turned to Marcus. If Brennan's backing Kozlov, that means Kozlov has access to federal resources. Surveillance, intelligence, possibly even tactical support. The safe house location might be compromised. We can move her. No time. If they're planning something for tonight, it's already in motion. We need to end this now. How? We can't touch Brennan without evidence, and going after Kozlov directly will just make you look like the aggressor. Dominic was quiet for a moment, thinking through angles and options, weighing strategies against time. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call he never thought he'd make. Victor Hart answered on the second ring. Vale. This better be important. It is. We need to meet. Now. It's about Lena. 30 minutes later, Dominic sat across from Victor in a neutral location, both men flanked by their people, the air thick with tension and temporary truce. Talk, Victor said. Dominic laid out everything. Kozlov's attack, Brennan's involvement, the threat against Lena. Victor's expression grew darker with each revelation. You're telling me a federal prosecutor is using criminals to consolidate power, and my sister is caught in the middle of it? That's exactly what I'm telling you. And if we don't work together, Kozlov's going to use her to force my hand. Brennan's going to use the fallout to eliminate both of us. And Lena ends up either dead or in the middle of a war that destroys the entire city. Victor was silent, processing. What do you need from me? Resources, manpower, your territory's intelligence network, and your agreement that for the next 24 hours, we're not rivals. We're allies with a common enemy. You're asking me to go to war alongside you. I'm asking you to help me protect your sister and take down a threat to both our operations. After that, we go back to our usual understanding. But right now, Lena needs both of us. Victor studied him with the intensity of a man who'd survived by reading people accurately. You really care about her. This isn't strategy or posturing. You actually love my sister. It wasn't a question, but Dominic answered anyway. Yes. Then let's end this before she gets hurt. They spent the next 3 hours planning, coordinating, using resources and intelligence from both organizations to build a picture of Kozlov's operation. By noon, they had locations, routines, and a plan that was risky but workable. By sunset, they were ready to move. Kozlov had set up in an abandoned factory on the south side, surrounded by his people, confident in Brennan's protection. He was planning to hit the safe house at midnight, using federal surveillance to identify the location and tactical support to overwhelm the guards. He wasn't expecting Dominic and Victor to hit him first. The assault was quick, brutal, and overwhelming. Dominic's people came from the north, Victor's from the south, a coordinated strike that gave Kozlov's defenders no time to organize. Gunfire echoed through the factory, brief and decisive, ending with Kozlov's people either dead or surrendering. Dominic found Kozlov in an office on the second floor, reaching for a phone that would call for Brennan's help. Dominic shot the phone out of his hand. "It's over, Anton." Kozlov looked up, blood running from a cut on his forehead, eyes wild with the recognition of complete defeat. "You can't touch me. I have protection from Thomas Brennan, the federal prosecutor who's been using you to consolidate criminal operations." Dominic moved closer. "See, that's the problem with being someone's tool, Anton. Eventually, they decide you're more useful discarded than employed. He'll come after you. Let him try. But right now, you're going to tell me everything about your arrangement with Brennan. Every meeting, every promise, every piece of evidence that proves he's been working with criminals. And you're going to do it on camera, clearly and completely, so that even his federal protection can't save him. And if I refuse?" Victor stepped into the room, and Kozlov's face went pale. "Then you deal with me instead of him. And I promise you, Anton, I'm significantly less interested in evidence and significantly more interested in making you suffer for threatening my sister." It took 2 hours, but they got everything. Kozlov on camera, detailing his arrangement with Brennan, providing dates and locations and specifics that would bury the prosecutor's career and send him to prison. Dominic recorded it all, made copies, sent them to journalists and law enforcement contacts he trusted. By midnight, the story was breaking. By morning, Brennan would be in custody, and Kozlov would be nothing but a cautionary tale. "What happens to him?" Victor asked, gesturing to where Kozlov sat, slumped and defeated. "That's your call. He threatened Lena. She's your sister." Victor studied Kozlov with cold assessment. "Normally, I'd kill him, but that makes him a martyr, gives Brennan something to use in his defense. Better if he lives long enough to testify than has an unfortunate accident in custody." "Works for me." They left Kozlov with the authorities, local police who owed Victor favors, who would ensure Kozlov made it to trial, and then ensured he didn't make it much further. Justice, criminal style. Outside the factory, Dominic and Victor stood in the cold night air, the temporary alliance already fraying back into their usual careful distance. "This doesn't change anything between us," Victor said. "Tomorrow, we go back to our territories, our understanding, our separate operations." "Agreed. But, Vale, take care of my sister. Give her the life she deserves. And if you can't, if this world becomes too much for her, you let her go. You don't trap her in your empire just because it's convenient. She's not trapped. She chose this. For now. But people change, circumstances change. Just promise me that when she wants out, if she wants out, you'll let her walk away." Dominic thought about that promise, about what it would cost to let Lena go if she decided this life wasn't sustainable, about the fact that loving her meant respecting her agency even when it hurt. "I promise," he said. Victor nodded and walked away, back to his own people, his own territory, his own version of control. Dominic pulled out his phone and called the safe house. "It's done. I'm coming to get her." The sun was rising when Dominic finally arrived at the safe house, exhausted and covered in other people's blood, but alive and victorious. Lena met him at the door, launched herself into his arms without caring about the violence he carried, and held on like she'd never let go. "Is it over?" she asked against his chest. "It's over. Kozlov's finished, Brennan's going down, and the threat's eliminated. You're safe." "We're safe," she corrected. "We're safe." She pulled back to look at him, taking in the exhaustion and blood and the weight of everything he'd done to protect her. "How bad was it?" "Bad enough. People died. I made decisions I'll have to live with, but we survived, and that's what matters." "Dominic, I need you to hear something. I'm not going to ask you to be someone you're not. I'm not going to try to save you or change you or pretend the violence doesn't exist. But I also need you to understand that every time you go to war, every time you choose violence to solve problems, I'm going to worry. I'm going to fear that you won't come back, and I need to know that's a cost you're willing to accept." He was quiet for a long moment. "That's fair. And I need you to understand that the violence isn't going away. This life, this empire I've built, it comes with enemies and threats and situations where mercy isn't an option. I can't promise I'll never have to make these choices again." I know. I'm just asking you to remember that I'm waiting on the other side of them. That you have something worth coming back to. I will, I promise. They stood there in the doorway, two people from different worlds who'd somehow found common ground in the spaces between safety and danger, between control and surrender, between the person they'd been and the person they were becoming together. Take me home, Lena said finally. Which home? Yours or mine? Ours, wherever that is. The weeks that followed were quieter, but no less transformative. Brennan's arrest made national news, exposing a web of corruption that reached into the highest levels of law enforcement. Kozlov died in custody exactly as Victor had predicted, and his organization scattered to the winds. The power vacuum got filled by people Dominic and Victor approved of, maintaining the delicate balance that kept the city functional. Lena moved most of her things into the penthouse, but kept her apartment, that small space of independence that reminded her she always had choices. She continued working at the brass mill 3 days a week, with discreet security that became less necessary as word spread that touching her meant declaring war on both Vale and Hart. She learned to navigate Dominic's world without losing herself in it, to be his partner without becoming his possession, to love a dangerous man while maintaining the strength that had attracted him in the first place. And Dominic learned something he'd thought impossible, that power shared wasn't power diminished, that vulnerability wasn't the same as weakness, that letting someone matter didn't make him controllable. It made him human. 6 months after that first morning when he'd found Maria bleeding in her apartment, Dominic stood in his penthouse looking at the life he'd built. The Empire was stronger than ever, his position secure, his enemies either defeated or convinced that cooperation was wiser than conflict. But none of it mattered as much as the woman sleeping in his bed, who'd somehow taught a monster how to be a man. Lena woke to find him watching her, early morning light painting everything gold. "What are you thinking about?" she asked sleepily. "That I was wrong." "About what?" "About power being the only thing worth having, about control being the same as strength, about needing to be alone to be safe." He moved to the bed, pulled her close. "You've ruined me for the life I had before." "Good. That life was lonely." "It was, but it was simple, predictable, safe in its own way. And now? Now I'm terrified every day that I'll lose you, that something will happen that I can't control or prevent, that you'll wake up and realize loving a criminal was a terrible idea." He kissed her forehead. "But I'm also happier than I've been in 20 years. So I'll take the terror if it comes with you." Lena smiled against his chest. "That's very romantic for a crime boss. Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to maintain. Your secret's safe with me." They lay there in the comfortable silence of people who'd learned to communicate in the spaces between words, who'd built something real in the ruins of everything that had tried to destroy them. Later that morning, over coffee and breakfast that Dominic insisted on making himself, Lena brought up something she'd been thinking about for weeks. "I want to start a foundation," she said. Dominic looked up from the eggs he was scrambling. "What kind of foundation?" "For people in situations like I was in, people drowning in medical debt, getting preyed on by loan sharks, stuck in cycles they can't escape. I want to help them get out before they end up like I did, desperate enough to make dangerous choices. That's going to be expensive." "I know. Which is why I'm asking if you'd be willing to fund it, anonymously, if you prefer. But I think we could actually make a difference, help people before they get desperate enough to walk into Kozlov's office." Dominic was quiet, considering. "You want to use criminal money to help people avoid criminals. I want to use money to help people, period. Where it comes from is less important than what it accomplishes." Victor would approve. He's always telling me I should find more legitimate ways to launder my reputation. Is that a yes? That's a yes. We'll set it up properly, legal and clean. You run it however you want, help whoever you think deserves it. Consider it my contribution to making sure fewer people end up in situations where they need saving. Lena crossed to him, kissed him properly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. The press is going to have a field day when Dominic Vale starts a charitable foundation. They'll spend months trying to figure out the angle. Let them. We'll know the truth. Which is? That monsters can still do good things. That people are more complicated than their worst decisions. and that sometimes the best way to change the world is to help one person at a time. Dominic pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her, still amazed that she was real, that she'd chosen him, that she saw past the violence to the man who'd been waiting underneath to be found. "I love you," he said, the words still unfamiliar but getting easier each time. "I love you too, even though you're occasionally terrifying and morally questionable." "Occasionally? I'm being generous." "I appreciate that." They finished breakfast together, made plans for the foundation, discussed whether Lena should finally quit the brass mill or keep it for the sense of normalcy it provided. Normal domestic conversations, except the people having them were a crime boss and the woman who'd accidentally conquered his heart. That evening, Dominic had one final piece of business to handle. He met Victor at their usual neutral location, a coffee shop that both organizations had agreed was off limits for violence. "The foundation's a good idea," Victor said without preamble. "Lena told me about it." "I figured she would. You approve?" "I approve of anything that makes my sister happy, though I still think you're a terrible influence." "Probably, but she seems to like me anyway." Victor smiled despite himself. "She does, which is why I wanted to give you this." He slid a small box across the table. Dominic opened it to find a ring, elegant, understated, with a diamond that caught the light. "That was our mother's," Victor said quietly. "Dad gave it to her when they got engaged. It's been in storage for years, waiting for the right person. I think that's Lena, and I think you're going to ask her eventually, so you might as well have something that means something." Dominic stared at the ring, understanding the weight of what Victor was offering. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Just do me a favor and don't propose anywhere ridiculous. She'll say yes wherever you ask, but she deserves something meaningful, not flashy." "I'll keep that in mind." "And Vale? When you do ask her, remember that you're not just asking her to marry you, you're asking to become part of her family, which means you'll be stuck with me as a brother-in-law. Think you can handle that?" "I've handled worse." "Debatable." Victor stood to leave. "Take care of her, make her happy, and if you need anything, backup, resources, someone to help hide a body, call me. We're family now, whether you like it or not." He left before Dominic could respond, disappearing into the evening crowd. Dominic sat there for a long time, holding a ring that represented promises and futures and the terrifying possibility of building something that lasted. Then he pocketed it carefully and drove home to the woman who'd made all of it possible. 3 months later, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, Dominic found Lena in the kitchen making coffee. She was wearing one of his shirts, hair still messy from sleep, looking more beautiful than anyone in designer clothes and perfect makeup. "I have something for you," he said. "It's not my birthday." "I know, but I wanted to ask you something." Lena turned, saw his expression, and her breath caught. "Dominic, let me say this before I lose my nerve." He pulled out the ring box. "I never thought I'd want this, never thought I'd be capable of it. I built a life on control and solitude, convinced that needing someone made you weak. And then you walked into that life and proved me wrong about everything." "You're really doing this." "I'm really doing this. Lena Hart, you've made me more human than I've been in 20 years. You've taught me that strength isn't the same as isolation, that love isn't weakness, that the best way to protect something is to let it be free. So I'm asking, will you marry me? Will you choose this life, this world, this complicated mess of violence and redemption? Will you choose me, knowing exactly what that means?" Lena looked at the ring, at Dominic's face, at the future stretching out before them. A future that would be complicated and dangerous and occasionally terrifying, but also real and honest and built on the kind of foundation that could withstand anything. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been waiting all this time for her to claim it. Then he kissed her, deep and thorough and filled with promises he intended to keep. When they finally broke apart, both smiling like idiots, Lena studied the ring more closely. "This was your mother's," she said to herself, then looked at him with wide eyes. "Victor gave you this. He thought you should have it. Said you deserved something meaningful. He approves. My brother actually approves of us." Shocked me too, but apparently we're family now. Lena laughed, bright and genuine. We're family. That's terrifying. Utterly. But we'll figure it out. Together? Together. They stood there in the kitchen as morning sun painted everything gold, two people who'd found each other in the ruins of desperate circumstances and built something worth keeping. The city stretched out below them, full of violence and beauty and possibility. And Lena realized that she'd been wrong about what she wanted. She'd thought she wanted freedom, independence, the ability to stand alone. But what she'd actually needed was partnership, someone who saw her strength and didn't try to diminish it, who offered protection without demanding surrender, who loved her enough to let her be exactly who she was. Dominic had given her all of that, and in return, she'd given him the one thing he'd never thought he deserved, the chance to be more than the monster everyone said he was. 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony with Aunt Maria crying happy tears, Victor looking uncomfortable in his role as the one giving Lena away, and Marcus providing security that was completely unnecessary but made everyone feel better anyway. The foundation Lena had started was thriving, helping dozens of people escape the kind of desperate situations that had nearly destroyed her. Dominic's empire continued operating, but with subtle changes, less violence, more strategy, a recognition that strength came in forms other than fear. And every night they came home to each other, to the penthouse that had become theirs, to the life they'd built together, to the impossible partnership between a crime boss and the woman who'd accidentally taught him how to love. The city learned a final lesson through their story, that the most dangerous ruler isn't the one without a heart, but the one who chooses exactly who it beats for. That power tempered with love is more formidable than power alone. That sometimes the best transformations come not from abandoning who you are, but from finding someone who makes you want to be better. Dominic Vale remained a feared name in criminal circles, but he was also a husband, a brother-in-law, a man who'd learned that protecting one person completely was worth more than controlling thousands imperfectly. And Lena Hart, now Lena Vale, remained strong, independent, fierce in her own right. She ran her foundation, helped people, maintained the parts of herself that had nothing to do with her husband's empire. But she also came home to arms that held her like she was precious, to a man who'd torn down his own walls to let her in, to a love that had started with debt and desperation, but transformed into something solid and real. Their story didn't end in peace. This world didn't allow for that, but it ended in certainty, in the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together, that the choice they'd made to love each other, knowing all the costs and complications, had been the rightest wrong decision either of them had ever made. And on quiet mornings when Lena woke up in Dominic's arms, when she looked at the ring on her finger and remembered everything they'd survived to get here, she understood what her younger self had been searching for all along. Not safety, not freedom from fear, not even independence, but the fierce, terrifying, exhilarating certainty of being chosen by someone who saw all of her, the strength and the scars, the defiance and the vulnerability, and decided she was worth everything. That was love in its truest, most dangerous form, and Lena wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.